The chains around Adelaide Price's wrists had worn her skin raw by the time the wagon rolled into Florissant, Colorado in the summer of 1878, and she had long since stopped trying to count the days since her husband died and his brother sold her to pay gambling debts, as though she were nothing more than a mare at auction. She sat among 3 other women in the back of the covered wagon, their eyes hollow and their spirits broken, while the man who called himself their new owner drove them toward whatever fate awaited in this dusty mountain town, surrounded by volcanic rock formations and pine forests. Adelaide was 22 years old, and she had once believed that life held promise and beauty, but that seemed like a lifetime ago now. The wagon lurched to a stop outside a saloon with peeling paint and a crooked sign that read the Silver Dollar. Adelaide's stomach churned as the canvas flap was pulled back and harsh sunlight flooded the dim interior. A thick-set man with tobacco-stained teeth leered at them, his eyes crawling over each woman in turn like she was merchandise to be inspected. "Got some fresh ones for you, McCready," the wagon driver said, jumping down with a jingle of coins in his pocket. "This one here's got some fire left in her." He grabbed Adelaide's arm and yanked her forward, making her stumble on legs that had gone numb from hours of sitting. Adelaide's dark hair hung in tangled waves around her face, and her calico dress was torn at the hem and stained with dust from the long journey. She lifted her chin despite everything, meeting McCready's gaze with defiance she did not truly feel. Her green eyes flashed with anger and fear in equal measure. "How much?" McCready asked, circling her like a vulture. "This one's worth at least 200. She's young, healthy, and she can read and write. Could work in more than just the usual capacity if you wanted." Adelaide's heart hammered against her ribs. She had heard stories about what happened to women in places like this, women with no family and no protection, women who were traded and sold until they forgot they had ever been human beings with dreams and dignity. Before McCready could answer, the saloon doors swung open and a tall figure stepped out into the sunlight. The man was lean and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck beneath his hat. He wore dusty clothes that spoke of long days working cattle, and a gun belt sat low on his hips. But it was his eyes that caught Adelaide's attention, gray as storm clouds and currently fixed on the scene before him with an expression of barely controlled fury. "What's going on here?" His voice was quiet but carried an edge sharp as broken glass. "None of your concern, Everett," McCready said dismissively. "Just conducting some business." "Business?" The cowboy, Everett, said the word like it tasted foul. He stepped closer, his gaze moving from McCready to the wagon driver and finally settling on Adelaide. Something flickered in those gray eyes, something that looked almost like recognition, though they had never met. "You are trafficking women now, McCready. I knew you were low, but this—" "It is all legal," McCready blustered. "They have debts to work off, is all." Nathan Everett looked at Adelaide again, really looked at her, and she felt something shift in the air between them. His jaw tightened as he took in the chains, the bruises on her wrists, the desperate fear she was trying so hard to hide behind false courage. "How much for her?" Nathan asked suddenly. McCready's eyebrows shot up. "You interested in buying, Everett?" "Thought you were too high and mighty for such things." "How much?" Nathan repeated, his hand moving to rest on the gun at his hip, not quite a threat but close enough. The wagon driver intervened quickly, sensing potential profit. 200, like I said. That is robbery. Supply and demand, friend. You want her or not?" Nathan's gray eyes met Adelaide's green ones, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. She saw no lust in his gaze, no cruelty, only a fierce determination and something that might have been compassion. He was offering her a way out, she realized, even if she had no idea what his true intentions were. 150, Nathan countered, and you throw in the key to those chains. The wagon driver considered, then spat into the dust. 175 and we have a deal. Adelaide watched as Nathan reached into his vest pocket and counted out bills with deliberate slowness, his face betraying no emotion. When the transaction was complete and the key was in his hand, he stepped toward her and gently unlocked the shackles around her wrists. The metal fell away and she gasped at the sudden relief, rubbing the raw skin carefully. "Can you walk?" Nathan asked quietly, and his voice up close was different than she expected, softer somehow, with genuine concern in it. "Yes," Adelaide managed, though her legs felt like they might give out at any moment. Nathan turned back to Macready and the wagon driver. "I catch either of you doing this again in my town and we will have words. Clear." "Your town," Macready laughed. "You do not own Florissant Everett." "Maybe not. But I know every rancher and honest businessman within 50 miles, and they all know me. You want to keep operating here, you will find a different line of work than selling human beings." The threat was unmistakable now, delivered in that same quiet voice that somehow carried more weight than shouting ever could. The wagon driver muttered something under his breath, but climbed back onto his seat. Macready retreated into his saloon, and the wagon rolled away with the 3 other women still trapped inside. Adelaide felt a stab of guilt that she could not help them, but she could barely help herself. Nathan offered her his arm, a gesture so unexpectedly gentlemanly that it nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Come on, let us get you somewhere safe." "Where?" Adelaide asked, her voice hoarse from disuse and thirst. "My ranch. It is about 5 miles outside town. You can rest there, get cleaned up, and we will figure out the rest later." "Why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why did you do that? You do not even know me." Nathan looked at her, and for the first time she saw a hint of sadness in those gray eyes. "My sister," he said simply. "She was trafficked after our parents died. I was too young then to do anything about it. I searched for her for 5 years before I found out she had died in a brothel in Denver. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in that situation, I would. So here we are." Adelaide's throat tightened. "I am sorry about your sister. Me too. But maybe I can make her memory mean something by doing right by you." He paused. "My name is Nathan Everett. I run a cattle ranch with my business partner, and I promise you that no harm will come to you there." "You have my word." "Adelaide Price," she whispered. "Or I was Adelaide Price. My husband died 6 months ago, and his brother sold me to settle debts. I do not even know if that was legal, but I had no one to help me, nowhere to go." "It was not legal," Nathan said firmly. "But men like that prey on women who have no protection. Well, you have protection now, for whatever that is worth to you." They reached a hitching post where a large bay horse was tied. Nathan untied the reins and then looked at Adelaide. "Have you ridden before?" "Yes, though not for some time." "All right. I will help you up, and then I will ride behind you so you do not fall. You look like you are about to collapse." He was right. Adelaide's whole body ached with exhaustion and hunger and fear. She let Nathan lift her into the saddle, his hands careful and impersonal, and then he swung up behind her with easy grace. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and she found herself leaning back against his chest despite herself, too tired to maintain propriety or distance. "Easy now," Nathan murmured, and she was not sure if he was talking to her or the horse. They set off at a walk, leaving Florissant behind and heading into the hills where ponderosa pines grew thick and the air smelled of sap and sun-warmed earth. Adelaide must have dozed because the next thing she knew, They were approaching a ranch house built of logs with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Outbuildings dotted the property, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance against the backdrop of mountains. It was beautiful in a stark, honest way, and something in her chest loosened slightly. Nathan helped her down and led her toward the house. "I will have my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, help you get settled. She is a good woman, came here from San Francisco 5 years ago. You will like her." As if summoned by his words, the front door opened, and a small Chinese woman with graying hair and shrewd eyes stepped out. She took one look at Adelaide and began speaking rapidly in accented English. "Mr. Nathan, what have you brought home now? This girl looks half dead. Bring her inside, quickly, quickly." Nathan obeyed, guiding Adelaide into a comfortable sitting room with furniture that looked well used but well made. Mrs. Chen fussed around her, bringing water and bread and directing Nathan to heat water for a bath. "You drink slow, Mrs. Chen instructed Adelaide. "Too fast and you will be sick. When did you eat last?" Adelaide tried to remember. "Yesterday morning, I think. They gave us cornmeal mush." Mrs. Chen made a disgusted sound and disappeared into what Adelaide assumed was the kitchen. Nathan stood awkwardly in the doorway, as if unsure what to do now that he had brought her here. "Thank you," Adelaide said, meeting his eyes. "I know those are just words, but I mean them. You saved my life today." "You are welcome," Nathan replied. "Listen, I want you to understand something. I did not bring you here with any expectations. You are not an indentured servant or anything else. You are a guest, and you can stay as long as you need to figure out what you want to do next. If you want to leave, I will help you get wherever you need to go. If you want to stay, we will find you honest work and you will be paid fairly for it. This is your choice, Adelaide. Your choice. Do you understand?" The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. No one had given her a choice in anything for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have autonomy, to have someone treat her like a person instead of property. "I understand," she managed. "Thank you." Nathan nodded and put his hat back on. "I will leave you to Mrs. Chen's care. I have work to do, but I will be around if you need anything." He left then, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and Adelaide was alone with the housekeeper. Mrs. Chen returned with a bowl of soup and more bread. "Eat this while water heats. Then bath, then sleep. You look like you have not slept well in a long time." "I have not," Adelaide admitted. She ate slowly, savoring every bite of the simple but delicious soup. It was vegetable beef, rich and warm, and it spread heat through her body like liquid comfort. True to her word, Mrs. Chen had a bath ready within the hour. She had set it up in a small room off the kitchen, and Adelaide sank into the hot water with a sigh that came from her very soul. Mrs. Chen had laid out clean clothes, a simple dress that was worn but mended, and Adelaide wondered who it had belonged to. "Was Mr. Nathan's sister's," Mrs. Chen said, as if reading her thoughts. "He cannot bear to throw away her things, but he will be glad to see them used for good purpose." Adelaide touched the fabric reverently. To wear a dead woman's dress felt strange, but it was offered with kindness, and she had nothing else. When she was clean and dressed, her hair still damp and hanging in waves down her back, Mrs. Chen led her to a small bedroom upstairs. "This is guest room. You stay here as long as you need. I am just down the hall if you need anything in the night." The room was simple but clean, with a quilt on the bed and lace curtains at the window. Adelaide looked at the bed with longing. "Mrs. Chen, is Mr. Nathan married?" "No, he has no wife. He is good man, but he has been alone since his sister died, throws himself into work and does not let anyone close. But he has good heart, you will see." Adelaide nodded and sat on the edge of the bed. "The women in the wagon," she said suddenly. "The ones who were not bought. What will happen to them?" Mrs. Chen's face grew somber. "I do not know, but Mr. Nathan will do what he can. He always does. Now rest. Tomorrow is a new day." Adelaide lay down on the bed and pulled the quilt over herself. Through the window, she could see the sun beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, felt safe enough to truly sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment she was disoriented, not sure where she was, but then memory returned and with it a rush of relief. She was at Nathan Everett's ranch. She was safe. Adelaide rose and dressed, finger combing her hair and wishing she had a proper brush. When she made her way downstairs, she found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen and Nathan sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. He stood when she entered, another gesture of respect that caught her off guard. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Adelaide admitted. She accepted the plate of food Mrs. Chen offered her and sat down at the table. It felt strange to be sitting at a table like a normal person, eating a normal breakfast, as if the horrors of the past months were just a bad dream. "I rode into town early this morning," Nathan said, his tone casual but his eyes serious. "Talked to the sheriff about what happened yesterday. He is going to look into the trafficking operation, see if he can track down that wagon and free those other women. I also sent a telegram to the territorial authorities. With any luck, they will shut down these routes." Adelaide set down her fork. "You did that, of course. What they were doing is illegal and immoral. Someone needs to stand against it. Most people would not get involved." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I am not most people, and like I said, I made a promise to my sister's memory." They ate in silence for a few moments, and then Adelaide asked, "What happened to your parents? You said they died." "Influenza epidemic when I was 16 and my sister Sarah was 14. We had no other family, and I was not old enough to be a legal guardian. Sarah was taken by a supposed charitable organization that promised to place her in a good home. Instead, they sold her to a brothel. By the time I tracked her down, it was too late." The pain in his voice was raw and real, despite the years that had passed. "I am so sorry, Nathan." He looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes at her use of his first name. "Life can be cruel, but it can also be good. I have built a decent life here, and I try to do right where I can. That is all any of us can do." "What will I do?" Adelaide asked quietly. "I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. My husband's family made it clear they wanted nothing to do with me except to profit from my sale." "First, you will recover your strength," Nathan said firmly. "Then we will figure out the rest. Can you cook, so keep books, all of those things?" "My mother raised me to be a proper wife and homemaker." There was bitterness in her voice that she could not quite hide. "Well, Mrs. Chen has been asking for help with the household work. The ranch keeps growing and it is getting to be too much for one person. If you wanted, you could work here. I would pay you fair wages, and you would have room and board. It would give you time to save money and decide what you want to do with your future." Adelaide looked at him, this strange cowboy who had spent his own money to save her from a terrible fate, who was offering her work and safety with no strings attached. She wanted to trust him, but trust was a luxury she could not afford easily anymore. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked bluntly. "What do you want in return?" Nathan met her gaze steadily. "Nothing. I want nothing in return except to see you safe and able to build a life for yourself. I know you have no reason to trust me, Adelaide. I know you have been hurt and betrayed. But I give you my word as a man that I will never harm you or take advantage of you. You are free here, truly free to make your own choices." Something in his voice convinced her. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe she was setting herself up for more heartbreak, but she believed him. "All right," she said softly. "I will stay, at least for now, and I will work to earn my keep. I do not want charity." "It is not charity. You will be doing real work and earning real wages. Mrs. Chen will be glad of the help." Nathan stood and picked up his hat. "I need to get out to the range. We are moving cattle today. But if you need anything, Mrs. Chen knows where to find me." After he left, Adelaide helped Mrs. Chen clean up the breakfast dishes. The older woman showed her around the house, explaining the daily routines and what needed to be done. It felt good to have purpose again, to have tasks that needed completing and hands that could complete them. Over the following days, Adelaide settled into a rhythm. She helped Mrs. Chen with cooking and cleaning, mending and laundry. She kept the books for the ranch, tallying expenses and income in neat columns that Nathan examined with approval. She learned that Nathan ran the ranch with a partner named Jack Morrison, who lived in one of the bunkhouses with the other ranch hands. Jack was a grizzled man in his 50s who had known Nathan since he first came to Colorado, and he treated Adelaide with gruff kindness. The ranch hands were a mixed group, some Mexican, some white, one black man named Samuel who had fought in the Civil War and came west afterward. They all treated Adelaide with respect, tipping their hats when they saw her and keeping their distance unless she initiated conversation. She got the sense that Nathan had made it very clear she was under his protection. Adelaide found herself watching Nathan when she thought he would not notice. He was different from her late husband, who had been charming but weak, prone to drinking and gambling away their money. Nathan was steady, reliable, and he worked harder than any man she had ever known. He was up before dawn and often did not come in until well after dark, his clothes dusty and his face lined with exhaustion. But he always had a kind word for Mrs. Chen, always asked Adelaide how her day had been, always treated everyone around him with basic decency. One evening about 2 weeks after Adelaide's arrival, Nathan came in from the range looking troubled. He washed up and joined Adelaide and Mrs. Chen for dinner, but he was quieter than usual. "What is wrong?" Adelaide asked finally, unable to bear his obvious distress. Nathan looked up from his plate. "Got word from town today. The sheriff found that wagon, but the women were already gone, sold off to different places, and the trail went cold. He arrested the wagon driver, but McCready disappeared, probably halfway to Kansas by now." Adelaide's heart sank. She had been trying not to think about those other women, but they haunted her dreams sometimes. "So they are just gone, for now, but the territorial authorities are taking it seriously. They will keep looking." Nathan rubbed his face tiredly. "I just wish I could have done more." "You did more than anyone else would have," Adelaide said firmly. "You saved me, Nathan, and you tried to help the others. You cannot save everyone. I know, but that does not make it easier." They finished dinner in thoughtful silence, and then Nathan surprised her by asking if she would like to sit on the porch for a while. The summer evening was warm and pleasant, with a breeze that carried the scent of grass and pine. They sat in rocking chairs side by side, not talking, just listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Adelaide felt more at peace than she had in years, despite everything that had happened. There was something about this place, this man, that made her feel like maybe life could be good again. "Tell me about your husband," Nathan said suddenly. "If you want to, I mean. You do not have to." Adelaide considered. She had not talked about Thomas in so long, and when she did it was with bitterness. But maybe it was time to let some of that go. "His name was Thomas. We married when I was 19 and he was 24. He was handsome and charming, and I thought I loved him, but he had demons, I suppose. He drank too much and gambled more. We were always scraping by, always one step ahead of debt collectors. When he died, He left me with nothing but debts and a brother-in-law who saw me as something to be sold. Did you love him? I thought I did at first. But love died pretty quickly under the weight of disappointment and broken promises. By the end, I was just surviving. Adelaide looked at Nathan. What about you? Have you ever been in love? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Once, when I was younger, a girl named Mary. But after Sarah died, I could not make myself care about much of anything for a long time. Mary married someone else and I threw myself into building this ranch. It has been enough, mostly. Mostly. Gets lonely sometimes, but I have good people around me and work to keep me busy. That is more than a lot of folks have. Adelaide wanted to tell him that he deserved more than just work and loneliness, that he deserved someone who would see what a good man he was and love him for it. But it was too soon for such words, too presumptuous. So instead she said, I am glad I ended up here, Nathan. I know the circumstances were terrible, but I am glad I met you. Nathan turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were soft. I am glad too, Adelaide. You have been good for this place. Good for me, if I am being honest. It is nice having someone to talk to who understands things. They sat together until the stars came out, talking about small things and big things, and Adelaide felt something growing in her chest that she was afraid to name. It was too soon, she told herself. She had only been here 2 weeks, and she was still healing from everything that had happened. But her heart did not seem to care about logic or timing. As the weeks turned into months, Adelaide's life at the ranch became more solid, more real. She took over more of the bookkeeping, freeing Nathan to focus on the cattle operations. She helped Mrs. Chen preserve vegetables and fruits for the winter. She learned to ride again, and sometimes Nathan would take her out to see the herd, pointing out the different breeds and explaining the ranch's breeding program. They were spending more time together, and Adelaide could feel something shifting between them. The way Nathan looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. The way her heart beat faster when he came in from the range, dusty and tired but smiling at the sight of her. The way their hands would brush accidentally and they would both pull back quickly, as if burned. One September afternoon, Nathan asked Adelaide if she would like to ride with him to check on a line shack in the higher pastures. It will take most of the day, he warned, but the views are incredible and I could use the company. Adelaide agreed readily. She had grown comfortable on horseback again, and she loved any excuse to spend time with Nathan, though she tried not to examine that feeling too closely. They packed a lunch and set out early in the morning, riding through meadows golden with autumn grass and forests where aspen trees were beginning to turn yellow. Nathan pointed out landmarks and told stories about the land, and Adelaide found herself laughing more than she had in years. When they reached the line shack, a small log cabin in a high meadow, Nathan checked the supplies and made notes of what needed to be restocked. Then they sat outside on a fallen log and ate their lunch, looking out over miles of rangeland and mountains. It is beautiful here, Adelaide said softly. I never knew the world could be this beautiful. Where did you live before? Nathan asked. St. Louis. It is a city, lots of people and noise and smoke, nothing like this. Adelaide turned to look at him. I think I was suffocating there and did not even know it. Out here I can breathe. Nathan smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. The West has a way of doing that for people, giving them room to be who they really are. Who am I, do you think? Adelaide asked, half joking, but Nathan answered seriously. You are strong, stronger than you give yourself credit for. You are kind and smart and capable. You are a survivor, Adelaide. And you are beautiful inside and out. Adelaide's breath caught. They were sitting close together on the log, and she could see the flecks of blue in Nathan's gray eyes, could see the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Nathan," she began, but she did not know what to say. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough from work but gentle as they traced the line of her cheek. "I know it is probably too soon," he said quietly, "and I know you have been through hell, but I need you to know that I care about you, Adelaide, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. You have brought light back into my life, and I do not know what I would do if you decided to leave." "I do not want to leave," Adelaide whispered. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Nathan, I care about you too. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it is too soon and I am not ready, but I cannot help it. You make me feel safe and valued and seen. You make me feel like maybe I could be happy again." "You could be," Nathan said fervently. "You deserve to be happy, Adelaide. You deserve everything good in this world." And then he was kissing her, soft and careful, as if she were something precious that might break. Adelaide kissed him back, pouring all her tangled emotions into it, all her fear and hope and growing love. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, give you time to be sure. I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated because I helped you." "You are not pressuring me," Adelaide assured him. "And I do not feel obligated. I feel happy, Nathan. For the first time in so long, I feel genuinely happy." They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, not talking much but comfortable in the silence. When they arrived, Mrs. Chen took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly, but she said nothing. That night, lying in her bed, Adelaide thought about how much her life had changed. 4 months ago she had been cargo in a wagon, traded like livestock, with no hope and no future. Now she was here in this beautiful place, with this incredible man who looked at her like she was a treasure worth more than gold. It felt like a dream, and she was terrified of waking up. But as the weeks passed and autumn deepened into winter, Adelaide slowly let herself believe that it was real. Nathan courted her with a sweetness that made her heart ache. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. He taught her to shoot so she would always be able to protect herself. He talked to her about his dreams for the ranch, asking her opinion as if it mattered, as if she were his partner in building this life. They took walks in the evenings when work was done, bundled in coats against the cold mountain air. They sat by the fire in the parlor, reading aloud to each other from books Nathan had collected over the years. They talked about everything and nothing, and Adelaide learned that Nathan was not just good and kind, but funny and thoughtful and deeply passionate about the things he cared about. In November, the first snow came early and heavy, blanketing the ranch in white. The cattle had to be brought down from the high pastures, and it was all hands on deck for several grueling days. Adelaide helped Mrs. Chen prepare meals for the exhausted ranch hands, and she worried every time Nathan went out in the freezing cold. One evening he came in later than usual, and Adelaide could see that something was wrong. His face was drawn and his movements stiff. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "Lost a few head in the storm," Nathan said tiredly. "And I wrenched my shoulder pulling a calf out of a snowbank. Nothing serious, but it hurts like hell." Adelaide immediately went to help him out of his coat, her hands gentle on his injured shoulder. "Sit down. Let me look at it." Nathan obeyed, too tired to argue. Adelaide carefully examined his shoulder, feeling for anything obviously wrong. "I do not think it is dislocated, but you have definitely strained something. You need to rest it." "Cannot rest. Too much work to do." "Nathan Everett, you will rest or I will tie you to that chair." Adelaide's voice was stern, but her eyes were worried. "You are no good to anyone if you work yourself into a real injury." Nathan looked up at her, and despite his pain and exhaustion, he smiled. "Are you ordering me around in my own house? Someone has to. You are terrible at taking care of yourself." Adelaide's hands were still on his shoulders, and she realized suddenly how close they were standing, how natural it felt to touch him, to care for him. "Adelaide," Nathan said softly, reaching up to take one of her hands in his. "These past few months with you have been the best of my life. I know we have not known each other that long, but I am sure of my feelings. I love you. I want to build a life with you, a real life, if you will have me." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Nathan. I think I have loved you since that first day when you looked at me and saw a person instead of property. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." Nathan stood, ignoring the twinge in his shoulder, and pulled her into his arms. "Then marry me. Be my wife, my partner, my everything. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "Yes," Adelaide breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." They kissed then, deep and passionate, and Adelaide felt like her heart might burst from happiness. This was what love was supposed to feel like, she realized. Safe and exciting, comfortable and thrilling, all at the same time. They were married in December in a simple ceremony at the church in Florissant. Jack Morrison stood up for Nathan, and Mrs. Chen stood with Adelaide, who wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had sewn for her from fabric Nathan had ordered from Denver. It was the most beautiful thing Adelaide had ever owned, deep green to match her eyes, with pearl buttons and lace at the collar. The whole town turned out for the wedding, it seemed. Nathan was well liked and respected, and people were genuinely happy for him. The sheriff was there, along with many of the ranchers and businessmen Nathan had mentioned. Several of the ranch hands cleaned up and came, and Samuel gave Adelaide a carved wooden box he had made as a wedding present. After the ceremony, there was a gathering at the ranch with food and music. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the barn which had been cleared out and decorated for the occasion. Nathan was not much of a dancer, but he waltzed with Adelaide while everyone clapped and cheered. "Happy," he murmured in her ear. "So happy I am afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream," Adelaide admitted. "It is real," Nathan promised. "You are real, and I am real, and this life we are building is real. I will spend every day making sure you know that." That night, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Nathan carried Adelaide over the threshold of their bedroom. He set her down carefully and looked at her with such love and desire that it took her breath away. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "About me, about all of it?" Adelaide reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I have never been more sure of anything. I love you, Nathan, completely and forever." They came together with tenderness and passion, and Adelaide felt like she was finally, truly whole. This was what she had been missing her whole life, this connection, this love, this feeling of being cherished and valued and desired. Nathan was gentle and patient, making sure of her pleasure before his own, and afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, hearts beating in sync. "I will never take you for granted," Nathan whispered into her hair. "I will never treat you as anything less than the treasure you are." Adelaide's throat tightened as she remembered the title that had been on her life just months ago, traded like livestock. But Nathan had seen her true worth from the very beginning, had treated her with dignity and respect when she had nothing and no one. "You already saved me," she whispered back. "Now you have made me whole." Winter deepened and life on the ranch continued its rhythm. Adelaide thrived as the lady of the house, managing the household with efficiency and warmth. She and Mrs. Chen worked together seamlessly, and Adelaide made sure the ranch hands were well fed and cared for. She also took over more of the ranch's business affairs, corresponding with buyers and suppliers, and Nathan came to rely on her judgment in financial matters. Their marriage was everything Adelaide had never known she wanted. Nathan was an attentive and loving husband, always making sure she knew she was valued. They talked for hours about their hopes and dreams, their fears and past hurts. Nathan told her more about Sarah, about the guilt he still carried for not being able to save her. Adelaide told him about her first marriage, about the slow death of hope under the weight of disappointment. "But you saved yourself, really," Nathan said one night as they lay in bed. "You survived. You kept your strength and dignity even when everything was being taken from you. I just gave you an opportunity. You did the rest." "We saved each other," Adelaide said firmly. "You were lonely and hurting too. You had closed yourself off from love because it hurt too much, but we found each other and now neither of us has to be alone." In the spring, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one April evening when he came in from checking the new calves. He was dusty and tired, but his face lit up like the sun when she gave him the news. A baby. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully. "Sorry, should I not have done that? Are you all right?" Adelaide laughed, delighted by his excitement and concern. "I am fine. And yes, a baby. Due in November, Mrs. Chen thinks." Nathan pulled her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents. Adelaide, I am so happy I do not even have words for it." "Me too," Adelaide said, leaning into him. "I never thought I would have this, Nathan. A real family, a home where I am loved and safe. Thank you for giving me this life." "Thank you for choosing me," Nathan replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who had given up on happiness." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Adelaide was tired and nauseous in the early months. Nathan hovered over her anxiously, much to her amusement and Mrs. Chen's exasperation. He tried to do all her work for her until Adelaide finally had to sit him down and explain that she was pregnant, not dying, and she needed to stay active and useful. "I just want to make sure you are all right," Nathan said, looking chastened. "I know, and I love you for it." "But I am strong, Nathan. You said so yourself. Let me be strong." He agreed, though he still insisted on doing all the heavy lifting and would not let her climb ladders or do anything he deemed potentially dangerous. Adelaide found it endearing, this fierce protectiveness, so different from her first husband's indifference. In June, they got word that the territorial authorities had shut down the trafficking ring that had been operating in Colorado and neighboring states. Several men were arrested, and they had managed to locate and free more than 20 women who had been sold. It was not enough, would never be enough for all the women who had suffered, but it was something. "I wish they could have saved those women from the wagon," Adelaide said quietly. "The ones who were with me." "I know," Nathan said, holding her close. "But maybe they saved others because of what happened to you. Maybe your suffering led to something good in the end." Adelaide wanted to believe that. She thought about those women often, wondering where they were, hoping that some of them had found their way to safety and happiness as she had. As summer turned to autumn and Adelaide's belly swelled with their child, she and Nathan spent hours talking about what kind of parents they wanted to be. They both agreed that their child would be raised with love and respect, taught to value people over property, to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. "Boy or girl, it does not matter to me," Nathan said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. His hand rested on Adelaide's stomach, feeling the baby kick. "Me neither," Adelaide agreed, "though I will admit I am curious to find out." "Whatever we have, they will be loved beyond measure," Nathan said firmly. "They will never know what it is like to feel unwanted or unsafe." Adelaide covered his hand with hers. With you as a father, I have no doubt of that. On a cold November night, Adelaide went into labor. Mrs. Chen took charge immediately, sending Nathan to fetch the midwife from town and boiling water and gathering clean linens. Nathan rode like the devil himself was chasing him, returning with the midwife in record time. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Nathan, pacing outside the bedroom door, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But finally, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, he heard the strong, angry cry of a newborn baby. The door opened and Mrs. Chen emerged, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Nathan. A big, healthy boy. And Adelaide is doing well, just tired." Nathan rushed into the room to find Adelaide propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Nathan, meet your son." Nathan approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had dark hair like his father and was currently scrunching up his face in preparation for another wail. "He is perfect," Nathan breathed. "Adelaide, you are amazing. Thank you for this gift." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Adelaide placed the baby in his arms. Nathan held his son with a mixture of terror and wonder, this tiny person who depended on them for everything, who represented their love and their future. "What should we name him?" Adelaide asked softly. They had discussed names but had not decided definitively. Nathan looked at his son, at his wife, at the life they had built together. "What about Joseph? It was my father's name." "Joseph Everett," Adelaide said, testing it out. "I love it." "And maybe Thomas for a middle name after my father." "Joseph Thomas Everett," Nathan agreed. "Welcome to the world, son." The baby settled down in his father's arms, seemingly content with the deep rumble of Nathan's voice. Adelaide watched them together and felt her heart might burst from happiness. This was her family, her real family, built on love and respect and partnership. The next months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Little Joey, as they called him, proved to have a strong set of lungs and definite opinions about when he wanted to eat and sleep. Nathan was a devoted father, getting up with Adelaide for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just staring at his son in amazement. "I cannot believe we made him," Nathan would say over and over. "Look at his tiny fingers. Look at his perfect little nose. He is a miracle, Adelaide." Adelaide, exhausted but happy, would laugh at her husband's awe. "You say that every day." "Because it is true every day." As winter turned to spring and Joey grew bigger and more alert, Adelaide found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in less than 2 years. She had gone from the worst moment of her life, being sold like property with no hope for the future, to this beautiful reality of love and family and purpose. One spring evening, she and Nathan stood on the porch watching Joey toddle around the yard under Mrs. Chen's watchful eye. The baby was 9 months old now, curious about everything and determined to explore the world on his own 2 feet, even if those feet were still a bit unsteady. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not been in town that day?" Nathan asked quietly. Adelaide shuddered. "I try not to, but when I do, I am grateful all over again for your goodness, for your courage in standing up to those men and saving me." "You saved me too, you know," Nathan said, pulling her close. "I was just existing before you came. Going through the motions of life but not really living. You brought joy back, Adelaide. You reminded me what it means to love and be loved." "Then we are even," Adelaide said, smiling up at him. "2 broken people who found each other and became whole." They stood together in the golden evening light, watching their son play, and Adelaide sent up a silent prayer of thanks to whatever power had brought them together. She had been traded like livestock, valued at nothing, treated as less than human. But Nathan had seen her true worth from that very first moment. He had treated her like the treasure she was, even when she could not see it herself. And in doing so, he had not only saved her life but given her a reason to live it fully and joyfully. This was what love was supposed to be, Adelaide thought. Not ownership or obligation but partnership and mutual respect. Not taking but giving. Not diminishing but celebrating. As the years passed, Adelaide and Nathan's love only deepened. Joey grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. When he was 3, he gained a baby sister, whom they named Sarah after Nathan's beloved sister. 2 years after that came another daughter, Emma, with strawberry blonde hair and a will of iron. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Adelaide proved to have a head for business, and she and Nathan expanded their operations carefully and strategically. They became known throughout Colorado as fair employers and honest dealers. Several of the ranch hands who had been there when Adelaide first arrived stayed on for decades, becoming like family. Mrs. Chen remained with them until her death at the age of 75, and Adelaide mourned her like a mother. The older woman had been her first friend in this new life, and Adelaide never forgot that kindness. As their children grew, Adelaide and Nathan made sure to teach them about compassion and justice. They told Joey and Sarah and Emma about how their parents had met, age-appropriate versions at first, but eventually the full truth. They wanted their children to understand that the world could be cruel and unfair, but that individuals could make a difference through courage and kindness. Joey grew up to be a rancher like his father, eventually taking over more of the day-to-day operations. Sarah became a teacher, passionate about education and helping young girls learn to read and write so they would have opportunities. Emma shocked everyone by becoming a lawyer, one of the first women to practice law in Colorado, and she specialized in cases involving women's rights and protection. Adelaide and Nathan could not have been more proud. Their children were living proof that love and respect could break cycles of cruelty and create something better. One summer evening when Adelaide was 45 and Nathan was 48, they sat on the porch of the ranch house they had shared for over 2 decades. Their children were grown now, building their own lives, though all still lived nearby. The ranch was thriving. They had grandchildren on the way, as Joey had recently married a sweet girl named Clara from a neighboring ranch. "You remember the day we met?" Nathan asked, reaching over to take Adelaide's hand. His hair was shot through with gray now, and there were deep lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to Adelaide he was as handsome as ever. "Every detail," Adelaide replied. "I remember thinking you were either the best man I had ever met or I was walking into another nightmare. I am so glad it was the former. Best decision I ever made, buying your freedom," Nathan said. "Though I hate that I had to buy it in the first place. You were always free, Adelaide. You always had value and worth. Those men who treated you otherwise were the ones who were less than human." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "You showed me my own worth at a time when I had forgotten it. You treated me like a treasure when I felt like trash." "That gift, Nathan, that kindness, it changed everything." "You changed everything," Nathan countered. "You brought this place to life. You made it a home instead of just a ranch. You gave me children and love and a reason to be better than I was." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Adelaide thought about the girl she had been, shackled in a wagon, terrified and hopeless. She thought about the women she had left behind, and she said a prayer that somehow, somewhere, they had found their own salvation. "I love you," Adelaide said softly. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Nathan replied. "You are my heart, Adelaide. You always will be." As darkness fell and stars began to emerge in the vast Colorado sky, they went inside together, hand in hand, to the home they had built, to the life they had created, to the love that had sustained them through everything. Adelaide Price Everett had been traded like livestock, valued at $175 by men who saw her as property. But Nathan Everett had seen her true worth from the very beginning. He had treated her like the treasure she was, and in doing so, he had given her back to herself. And she had done the same for him, healing his wounded heart, bringing light to his darkness, showing him that love was worth the risk of pain. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Together, they had created a legacy of love and justice that would ripple out through their children and grandchildren, and beyond. Years later, when Adelaide was 68 and Nathan was 71, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary surrounded by their 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. The ranch house was full of laughter and love, and Adelaide looked around at all these people, this family that had grown from that one choice Nathan made so long ago in the dusty street of Florissant. After the celebration, when everyone had gone home or to bed, Adelaide and Nathan sat once more on their porch as they had done countless times over the decades. 50 years, Nathan said wonderingly. 50 years since I saw you in that wagon and knew I had to help you. Did you know then?" Adelaide asked. "That we would end up here," Nathan considered. "I did not know we would fall in love, but I knew you were special. I knew you deserved better than what was happening to you, and I knew that if I did nothing, I would regret it for the rest of my life." "I am so glad you did something," Adelaide said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so glad you were brave enough to stand up to those men, generous enough to spend your money on a stranger, kind enough to give me a place to heal." "And I am glad you were brave enough to trust me," Nathan replied. "Brave enough to let yourself love again after everything you had been through. You could have kept your walls up, Adelaide. You could have taken my help and then left to start over somewhere else, and I would have understood. But you stayed. You chose me, and you chose this life, and you made me happier than I ever imagined possible." They rocked in their chairs, holding hands, 2 old people who had lived a life full of purpose and love. The ranch would go to Joey when they were gone, and Adelaide knew he would care for it as they had, with respect for the land and the people who worked it. Sarah's school in Florissant was educating dozens of girls every year, giving them opportunities their mothers and grandmothers never had. Emma's legal practice had helped countless women escape bad situations and claim their rights under the law. The impact of Nathan's one courageous choice, of Adelaide's resilient spirit, had spread far beyond anything they could have imagined. As the years continued to pass, Nathan's health began to decline. He was 76 when he had his first heart attack, and though he recovered, he was never quite as strong afterward. Adelaide cared for him with the same devotion he had always shown her, making sure he was comfortable, reading to him when he was too tired to focus on the page himself, holding his hand through the difficult days. One spring morning, Nathan did not wake up. Adelaide found him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still warm in hers. The grief was crushing, a physical weight that pressed on her chest and made it hard to breathe. But even through the pain, she was grateful. Grateful for every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear, every challenge they had faced together. Nathan Everett was laid to rest on a hill overlooking the ranch he had built, with a view of the mountains he had loved. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched, Joey spoke about his father's integrity and kindness. Sarah talked about how her father had always believed in her dreams, no matter how unconventional. Emma, normally so strong and professional, broke down as she described the example her father had set for how men should treat women, with respect and equality. And Adelaide, standing by the grave of the man who had saved her and loved her and built a life with her, spoke last. "Nathan saw people," she said simply. "He saw their worth, their humanity, their potential. He saw me when I was at my lowest, when I had nothing to offer him, when I was just cargo in a wagon, and he saw treasure. He treated me with dignity and respect when I had no power, no money, no leverage. He gave me my life back, and then he shared his with me. That was the kind of man Nathan Everett was. That is the legacy he leaves behind." Adelaide lived for 7 more years after Nathan's death. She watched her grandchildren grow and marry, welcomed more great-grandchildren, and saw the ranch continue to thrive under Joey's management. She spent her time writing down the story of her and Nathan's life, wanting future generations to understand where they had come from and what their family stood for. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, and she was buried next to Nathan on the hill overlooking the ranch. At her funeral, her great-granddaughter, a girl of 12 named Adelaide after her, read from the memoir Adelaide had written. "My grandmother wrote that she was traded like livestock," young Adelaide read, her voice clear and strong. "But my grandfather treated her like the treasure she was. And in doing so, he showed us all what love really means. Not ownership, but partnership. Not control, but respect. Not taking, but giving. Their love story is not just about them. It is about what we can all be when we choose courage over indifference, kindness over cruelty, love over fear." The words echoed across the hillside, carrying on the wind that blew down from the mountains, the same wind that had blown through this land for thousands of years and would blow for thousands more. And in that wind was the spirit of Adelaide and Nathan Everett, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. Their story became legend in Colorado, passed down through generations of the Everett family and beyond. It was a story of resilience and redemption, of courage and compassion, of a love that transformed 2 broken people into something whole and strong. It was the story of a woman who was treated as property but never lost her essential humanity, and a man who had the vision to see her true worth. It was a story of how one choice, one act of defiance against injustice, could ripple out and change the world. And it all began on a dusty street in Florissant, Colorado in the summer of 1878, when Nathan Everett saw Adelaide Price in chains and decided that he would not walk away, would not pretend not to see, would not let evil triumph without a fight. He saved her that day. And in the years that followed, she saved him right back. Together, they built a life and a love that stood as a testament to the best of what humanity could be. The ranch still stands today, run by the 6th generation of Everetts, and on the hill overlooking the valley are 2 headstones, side by side, marking the resting place of Nathan and Adelaide. Visitors still come sometimes, drawn by the story, wanting to pay their respects to 2 people who showed the world what it means to see the treasure in another human being. And if you stand there at sunset, when the light turns everything golden and the wind whispers through the grass, you can almost feel them there still, holding hands and watching over the land they loved, the family they created, the legacy they left behind. Adelaide was traded like livestock, valued at $175 by men who could not see past their own greed and cruelty. But Nathan Everett treated her like the treasure she was, and in doing so, he gave her back her life, her hope, her future. and she gave him the same in return, healing his wounded heart, filling his empty house with love and laughter, showing him that the pain of the past did not have to define the joy of the present. Their story is a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life, to stand up against injustice, to choose kindness when the world chooses cruelty. We all have the power to see the treasure in others, even when they cannot see it in themselves. Nathan and Adelaide Everett lived that truth every day of their lives together. They built a love that was strong enough to weather any storm, a partnership that was true and equal, a family that carried their values forward into the future. And it all started with one cowboy who saw a woman in chains and decided that he would not, walk away. One man who looked at a stranger and saw not property or burden, but a human being with inherent worth and dignity. One choice, made in a moment, that echoed through decades and generations. That is the power of love. That is the power of one person choosing to do right. That is the legacy of Nathan and Adelaide Everett, and it lives on still in the hearts of all who hear their story and are inspired to see the treasure in every human being they meet.